Would you raise your little brother after your parents died and gave up everything for him? I did. I built a company from scratch and handed him half. Then one morning, he changed the locks, erased my name from the paperwork, and stole the entire damn company from me. I'm Liam, 29. I've got a permanent dent in my right shoulder from carrying the weight of someone who turned around and stabbed me in the back. My little brother, Evan, is 21 now. But that's enough introduction. Let's dive into the story. I was 17 when I got the call. Some guy with a voice like toast telling me our parents had been in a car crash. Head on. The drunk driver didn't make it either. I remember the exact words. Your parents were pronounced dead at the scene. Like it was nothing. Like he was reading a goddamn weather report. I hung up. Evan was 9. He was in the next room watching cartoons. I had to sit down and figure out how the hell I was going to explain to a 4th grader that mom and dad weren't coming back. That we were it now. Just us. The social worker showed up 2 days later. Said she had a nice foster home lined up for Evan and that I'd be able to visit. I told her to go to hell. I didn't care that I wasn't technically old enough. I wasn't going to let some strangers raise my brother. I'd already packed up our stuff by the time she showed up, like I knew deep down this was how it was going to go. We moved into a 1-bedroom shoebox on the east side. It smelled like mildew and cat piss, but the rent was cheap and the landlord didn't ask too many questions. I took the floor for a while so Evan could have the bed. That turned into 2 years. No big deal. I was used to being uncomfortable. I gave up a full ride to state college. Had an acceptance letter sitting in a drawer while I pulled doubles at a warehouse and mopped floors at a bar that didn't card me for drinks if I cleaned the toilets right. I found online gigs designing logos for shady crypto startups and local bakeries. You name it, I did it. Anything to keep the lights on and Evan in school. We had routines. I'd wake up at 5, pack Evan's lunch, bike across town for my shift, come back, cook dinner, help him with homework, crash for 3 hours, then do it again. If he needed shoes, I didn't eat. If he had a school play, I took the night off, even if it meant losing hours. I became half parent, half punching bag for the universe, and no one gave a damn. That was fine. I wasn't doing it for applause. People told me I was so strong. Translation: it sucks, but I'm glad it's not me. They called me responsible. I felt more like a ghost, just haunting the edges of a normal life while everyone else moved on. Evan didn't remember much about the crash. He cried for a few weeks, then buried it. Kids do that. He bounced back faster than I did. Had friends. Got decent grades. I was proud of that. I thought maybe if I just kept my head down and pushed through, things would balance out eventually. I started a small side hustle doing freelance design. Dumb stuff at first, wedding invitations, Etsy logos, YouTube banners. Eventually, I got a couple of real clients who paid on time and recommended me. I built a site, made a name. The business wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. By the time I was 24, we were stable. Not thriving, but surviving. I got us into a 2-bedroom with heating that actually worked. Evan had his own space. He started calling me L-Man instead of bro because he thought it sounded cooler. That was the closest thing to affection I got, and I took it. There were moments I thought, yeah, maybe this could be enough. I'd watch Evan sleep before heading out for a night shift, and I'd think, I did that. I kept him safe. Like some broke-ass Batman with no suit, no car, and no social life. I didn't date. Didn't party. Didn't really have friends. I had coworkers I tolerated, and delivery guys who knew my order. That was it. My world was work, bills, and Evan. And you know what? I didn't resent it. Not then. I wasn't bitter. I genuinely thought I was doing what any decent person would do. I figured if I just worked hard enough and stayed good, life would return the favor. Spoiler, life doesn't give a shit how good you are. Back then, Evan would draw superheroes and leave them on the fridge. He made me a birthday card once that said, "Thanks for being my real-life hero." I found it again years later when I was packing up my desk after he'd kicked me out of the company. It was still smudged with orange crayon and spaghetti sauce. Anyway, those early years. That's when I started building myself into the guy I thought I had to be. No room for screw-ups. No time for fun. Just a wall of focus and grit and a to-do list that never ended. That's the part no one tells you about being the responsible one. Once you start carrying everyone else's weight, no one ever asks if your legs are giving out. They just expect you to keep walking. And I did, right into the next disaster. By the time Evan started college, I had a small agency running out of a rented studio downtown. Nothing fancy, Just a glorified brick box with chipped paint and decent Wi-Fi. But it had my name on the lease, and clients kept coming. I had a couple freelancers I trusted, a handful of decent contracts, and enough money to stop eating expired ramen every other night. I paid for Evan's tuition out of pocket. No loans, no debt. Didn't want him starting life the way I had. One step from broke and one bad month from homeless. He didn't ask me to, but he didn't fight it either. Just said thanks like I was buying him a burrito instead of a 4-year degree. He got into a mid-tier university with a halfway decent business program. I thought it was perfect. Close enough to visit. Far enough to give him space. I remember driving him to campus the first day. He had this look on his face like the world was finally about to open up. I didn't say it then, but I felt proud as hell. Like everything I'd gone through had built up to this moment. Mission accomplished, right? That was the last time we really talked for a while. He got busy, or so he said. We'd text now and then, mostly when he needed something. He came home for the holidays, crashed on the couch, and left a mess behind. I chalked it up to growing pains. He was finding himself. That's what college kids do, right? Still, it stung. I wasn't looking for a parade, but I thought we were closer than that. I had visions of us eventually working side by side. He'd take over the business someday. We'd be partners. Family building something together. A legacy or some other sentimental bullshit I'd cooked up during too many lonely nights. I kept grinding while he was away. Took on a city project that nearly killed me. Hired a second designer who immediately got poached. Started losing sleep over contracts and taxes and whether the internet bill had been paid. Running a business is just putting out fires while trying not to set yourself on fire. But hey, I was still standing. Then Evan graduated. He came back home, diploma in hand, suddenly full of ideas. Wanted to scale up, leverage brand equity, and other MBA speak that made me want to headbutt a whiteboard. He started hanging around the office, poking into meetings, suggesting efficiency overhauls, without actually understanding what anyone did. I didn't care. I was just happy to have him back. I figured we'd find our rhythm again. He was older now. Smarter, maybe. More ready. That's when he brought Tess around. Tess was sharp. The kind of smart that sees through people but doesn't say it out loud. She had this dry look in her eyes like she'd already read the script and was just waiting for everyone else to catch up. I liked her immediately, probably because she reminded me of me. Tired, observant, always thinking 10 moves ahead. She worked in finance, I think. Or maybe marketing. Something corporate and soul-draining. She never said much, but when she looked at Evan, it wasn't soft. It was calculating. They weren't official at first. Just hanging out, according to Evan. But she was always around. She started asking questions. How the business worked, how decisions got made, who owned what. At first, I didn't think anything of it. I thought she was just curious. Now I know better. Around that time, I started burning out. I was pulling too many hours, doing too much solo. When Evan offered to lighten the load, I nearly cried. I thought, finally, I can breathe. So I gave him access to the accounting software. Set him up with a company email. Introduced him to clients as my co-founder. That part's funny, right? Co-founder. Like he was there during the nights I cried over a busted laptop and overdue bills. Still, I wanted him to feel ownership. He was my brother. My only family. I thought I was doing something good. Giving him purpose. A future. He ran with it. Started dressing sharply. Talking like a CEO. Took credit for a few projects I'd finished while he was still failing midterms, but I let it slide. I told myself it didn't matter. As long as the company thrived, we both won. But small things started piling up. Clients calling to confirm things I never said. A vendor asked why we were changing bank accounts. Evan brushes it off as streamlining. Then Tess started showing up at meetings, not as a plus one, but like she was part of the team. No one knew what she actually did, but she had opinions. And Evan backed her. Always. I started feeling like the third wheel in my own damn company. I brought it up once, said maybe we should slow down, reevaluate roles. Evan laughed, said I was resistant to growth, that I was stuck in a small business mindset. I told him to fuck off. He shrugged and left early. I should have seen it then. The writing was on the wall. I was just too damn tired to read it. I figured we'd fight, then cool off. That's how family works, right? You scream, then eat takeout and forget about it. But not this time. Something had shifted. The dynamic had changed. And I didn't realize how far it had gone until I got the first warning. But that's next. It came in at 2:17 a.m. on a Thursday. Subject line, you need to see this. No signature. No intro. Just a few attachments and a short message that said, "Check who's on the paperwork before it's too late." Now, most of the time, I'd delete something like that. Sketchy emails are nothing new when you run a business with your name on the door. People phishing, spamming, trying to get you to click a link that'll hijack your whole damn life. But this one didn't have links. Just PDFs. 3 of them. I opened them. I don't know why. Maybe gut instinct. Maybe curiosity. Maybe because I'd been feeling off for weeks and needed something to explain it. First document. An account summary from our bank, showing a new business account I didn't recognize. The name was a variation of our agency. Same branding, different legal structure. Opened 3 weeks ago. Evan is listed as the sole account holder. Second document. A notarized amendment to our ownership agreement. Supposedly signed by me, dated last month. Gave Evan 75% equity. Transferred voting rights. Said I was stepping back. I don't remember signing shit. I zoomed in on the signature. Looked close, but not quite. Like someone who studied my handwriting and got 90% of the way there. Third doc? A draft email thread between Evan and Miles. Yeah, that Miles, my old roommate and sometime investor. They were talking about a clean transition and phasing out Liam quietly. My name. In writing. Like I was a piece of old furniture. They were trying to get rid of me without making noise. I sat there in the dark for 10 full minutes, just staring. My hands went numb. My heart was thudding in my ears. Then I did something incredibly stupid. I closed the laptop and went to bed. I didn't reply, didn't confront Evan, didn't forward the documents to a lawyer or even a friend. I convinced myself it had to be a prank. A bad joke. Someone is screwing with me. Or maybe Evan was doing something temporary, something legal I just wasn't looped in on. Maybe the email was fake. That's what trust does. It makes you stupid. The next morning, I walked into the office like nothing had happened. Evan was already there, grinning like he owned the place. He was extra chipper, talking about onboarding new clients, adding advisors, whatever the hell that meant. I asked him about the account changes. He brushed it off, said it was for tax purposes. I laughed, like I was in on the joke, like I hadn't seen the papers. But things started adding up real quick after that. One of our longtime clients emailed me to ask why my signature had disappeared from all the invoices. I hadn't noticed. I checked our invoice system. Sure enough, everything now came from Evan. He was listed as creative director. I was founder, retired. I hadn't retired. I hadn't even taken a vacation in 3 years. Then a freelancer messaged me asking if we were switching payment platforms. Evan had apparently set up a new payment portal without telling me. Said I'd approved it in a meeting. News to me. Tess stopped making eye contact when she came in. She started staying quiet in meetings. Once, I caught her watching me while Evan was talking. She looked uncomfortable. Guilty, even. But when I asked her if something was up, she just said, "Ask your brother." Evan, meanwhile, was acting like he'd already won. He was dressing sharply, taking more meetings. Started using we when he really meant me. Said things like, "We've evolved past the old model," in front of clients who had worked with me for years. Some of them looked confused. Some didn't care. And me? I let it slide. I kept making excuses. He's young. He's ambitious. He's just trying to prove himself. I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't. Because if I admitted what was happening, I'd have to admit I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. Trusting someone I'd raised from the ground up. Someone I fed, clothed, and sheltered. Someone I loved like a goddamn son. So I stayed quiet. Did the work. Smiled in meetings. Tried to catch up on paperwork. Evan had already changed. Pretended not to notice that the house I'd built was slowly being stolen one floorboard at a time. That anonymous email haunted me. I kept going back to it, rereading the documents like maybe they'd rewrite themselves. Like maybe I'd misunderstood. But I hadn't. I just didn't have the stomach to do anything about it. Not yet. But the countdown had started. I just didn't hear the clock ticking. I pulled up to the office at 8 a.m. sharp, coffee in hand and head buzzing from last night's strategy session. The building was the same tired brick box I'd leased years ago, but this morning it looked as alien as the moon. The front door, once a simple lock, now sported a new deadbolt. The kind of upgrade you don't install for fun. I jiggled my key. Nothing. The handle rattled, but the lock held firm. I tried again, slower this time, like maybe it was just stiff. I glanced at the keypad beside the door. No code I knew would work. My own office refused to recognize me. I pounded on the glass. Through the tinted window, I saw Evan's figure at a back desk, leaning forward, smiling down at a screen. He looked like a kid playing with a new toy. My toy. The locks clicked behind him, and I felt the ground shift beneath my boots. I called his extension. It rang once, twice. Then his voice, yeah. He sounded too calm, as if he'd borrowed my tone long enough to learn how to piss me off with it. Why the hell can't I get inside? I kept my voice steady, but under the calm, I heard my own pulse racing. I didn't change the lock. Oh, sorry, he said, voice saccharine. Must have hired someone to upgrade security over the weekend. You know how these things go. He didn't pause. Like, he didn't expect me to argue. I updated the access list. You're not on it right now. I stared at the phone. Those words punched a hole in my chest. Not on it, he said casually. That was the same phrase he'd used to describe expunging my name from legal documents and client lists. He was running me out again, this time with power tools. I slammed the phone shut. I tried the side door. Also locked. The rear entrance. Locked. The only door that would open was the loading dock, which triggered alarms if you didn't swipe a badge. I didn't have one. I felt my face burn with rage and humiliation. Inside through the glass wall, I watched Evan turn in his chair and give me a small wave, the kind you give an ex who shows up at your apartment by mistake. Then he looked away and got back to work. I called Miles next. He picked up on the first ring. Hey, Liam, he said. Listen, I just checked the filings. Everything's kosher. Evan's the sole owner now. His tone was breezy, like he was telling me about the weather. He handled the transition brilliantly. Investors are pleased. I laughed, but it came out hollow. So you backed him to push me out? Partner move, he said. He had the vision. You were overextended. It's business. No feelings. Miles hung up before I could choke on any retort. I stared at the phone like it had betrayed me, too. I stumbled back to my car and drove straight to Rita's place. The ex-landlord who never missed an opportunity to remind me that life wasn't fair, but you could bitch about dinner or stay hungry. She answered in her nightgown, hair a tangled mess. I looked like a wreck. She didn't ask questions. Wordlessly, she handed me a beer and pointed to the couch. I sank down and turned the label until it tore. I didn't have to explain, but I did anyway. Told her everything while she listened, nodding like she'd expected it all along. When I finished, she said, You're a fool, but you know that. You let them rewrite your life while you kept breathing. Her blunt comfort felt like balm and salt in one go. I needed to do something. Not just stand there while they demolished everything. But I was exhausted. The hours, months, and years of building had taken the same toll as a slow rot. Now it was faster, more violent. I remembered the anonymous email, the PDFs showing forged signatures, new bank accounts, amended bylaws. I'd been too scared to act then. I pretended it was a prank. Now, those documents were my only ammunition. If I wanted to go back in, I had to use them. I called a lawyer friend, Jake, someone I'd helped with pro bono work during lean months. His office was 2 blocks away. By the time I reached him, my throat was sore from shouting at voicemails. He glanced at the papers, eyebrows climbing toward his hairline. Liam, this is solid, but it's going to take weeks to unpick, and you'll have to prove fraud in court. You realize that, right? Do it, I said, voice flat. I want him accountable. I want him out of my life and off all the contracts he's fucking with. He nodded, took a deep breath. Okay, I'll draft a suit. We'll need witness statements, client testimonies, bank statements, everything. He looked at me like he was measuring how much I could handle. Expect a fight. I thanked him and left, legal folder in hand, head spinning with a million tasks. Step 1 was served. Step 2 was surviving the fallout. Back at the building, I watched from across the street as Evan strode out at 5:30, briefcase in hand, a triumphant swagger I once recognized. He waved at me, like he owned the sidewalk, too. I returned a nod that felt like glass. Inside that night, I sat at the table in my empty apartment, surrounded by case files, meeting notes, and takeout containers. I typed out complaint drafts, flagged dubious transactions, and drafted witness lists. As the city lights blinked outside, I felt that old survival instinct kick back in. That same grit that got me through foster threats, double shifts, and endless deadlines. They'd taken my office. They'd poisoned my trust. But they hadn't broken my spine. I closed my laptop for the night and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow, I'd file. Tomorrow, I'd call clients. Tomorrow, I'd start taking back what was mine. Because you can't steal a man's will. And I wasn't done yet. I wasn't expecting contact from Tess. After the takeover, she disappeared like smoke in a wind tunnel. No messages, no visits, nothing. And the truth is, I wasn't exactly chasing updates. Every conversation felt like salt in an open wound. But one Tuesday morning, my phone buzzed with an unknown number and a text that simply read, "Check your email." I ignored it while I sketched bullet points for the lawsuit. Then curiosity beat exhaustion. I opened my laptop, hit the inbox, and saw a new message with a subject line, "Don't wait any longer." The body read, "I sent you the PDFs before you got locked out. I'm sorry it took so long. You need everything else." Attachments follow. 3 folders downloaded instantly: legal_docs, call_logs, and financials_extra. I stared at them. My heart was throbbing so hard I could hear it in my ears. I clicked legal_docs first. There were copies of amended agreements that showed not only the 75% transfer, but every share dilution and board vote that removed my rights. The forgeries were meticulous, down to notarized stamps I'd thought were real. I scrolled until I found one that was clearly backdated. Whoever did this had planned it for months. Next, I opened call_logs. There were transcripts of private calls between Evan and Miles, but now Tess had redacted Miles's voice, so her notes stood out. She'd logged investor meetings where they agreed to quietly push Liam out, discussions of emergency cash injections, and plans to spin any legal challenge as frivolous. Tess even documented the moment they decided to blame me for mismanagement rather than admit their own fraud. In financials_extra, there were screenshots of offshore accounts set up under shell companies linked to Evan's corporate email. Money had been siphoned in small increments for months, just enough to avoid triggering automated alerts, but enough that, over time, it totaled 6 figures. I closed the laptop, hands shaking. I could taste bitterness on my tongue. The person I trusted most had manipulated my business and finances so precisely that I almost admired the execution, if admiration didn't taste like bile. I sent Tess one reply, "Meeting?" No exclamation points, no please, just a word. Then I paced my apartment, 7 steps forward, 7 back, trying to decide if I should feel relief or rage. Relief because I finally had concrete proof. Rage because my brother's girlfriend had been the one brave enough to admit it. An hour later, I met Tess at a generic coffee shop. She sat in a corner booth, hood up, sunglasses on. She nodded when I sat down, slid a manila envelope across the table without looking up. I took it and tucked it into my bag without a word. She spoke first. I should have come sooner. Her voice was low, tired, but I didn't know if I could do more than send the files. I said nothing. My jaw clenched so tight I could see lines in my cheeks. She continued, "They're ruthless. I tried to warn you months ago, but you didn't believe me. You thought I was interfering. I get it." She paused, took off her sunglasses. I hated watching it happen. I hated him lying to me. But he threatened me. Miles threatened me. I had to gather proof. I felt a mix of gratitude and anger swirling inside me. "Why now?" I asked, voice flat. "Because I almost printed money for him," she said. Literally. There was a wire transfer scheduled yesterday. 1 click and he'd have a bonus that would fund a private jet lease. He didn't want to share it. He wanted it all. She shoved a folded printout onto the table, a bank confirmation form with her handwriting marking the swap details. That was my breaking point. I looked down at the envelope beside me and realized it was half empty. There were witness statements from a junior accountant who quit after being asked to backdate invoices, timestamped logs of board portal entries, and even a screenshot of Evan's notes on his phone describing the perfect betrayal. Every piece of the puzzle was there. I leaned back and ran my hands over my face. Jesus. I didn't know what else to say. My voice felt foreign. Tess studied me and quietly said, "You have what you need. I can testify if it goes to court. Or we can leak it. I know a reporter." She didn't need to say the reporter's name. I knew exactly who at the local business journal would bite. I realized I had a choice. I could go the legal route, drag my brother through months or years of courtroom hell, risk losing in a drawn-out battle, maybe even ending up bankrupt from legal fees. Or I could expose everything publicly, force investors to pull out overnight, and watch the house of cards collapse in a week. My gut said public. My mind argued for the court. I'd never been one to shy away from a fight. But I also hated the idea of wall-to-wall coverage dredging up my past sacrifices, my mistakes, my failures. Tess watched me decide. Finally, I told her, let's do both. We start with the court filing tomorrow, and I'll leak to your reporter next week if they don't act fast. I sounded like someone else, cold, resolute. She nodded and gathered her things. Before she left, she said, be ready for fallout. He'll come after you in everything he can. I swallowed hard. I'm ready. Because after years of carrying everyone else's weight, I was done standing still. And that was the real turning point. I dropped the lawsuit papers off at the courthouse first thing Monday, then headed back to the office building. Only this time I didn't intend to go inside. I parked across the street and watched the place I'd poured my life into. Clients moved in and out. Contractors carried hard drives and coffee. The whole scene looked normal, like nothing had changed. But everything had. That afternoon, the local business journal ran a front-page story. Sibling betrayal. Founder accused of fraud. Tess's reporter laid out the timeline, the forged signatures, and the siphoned funds. Investors pulled out minutes after it went live. Miles went radio silent. Evan was quoted as calling it a vindictive smear campaign. Classic. Defend yourself by attacking the messenger. I thumbed through my phone and saw 3 missed calls from Evan's lawyer, from Miles, and 1 from Evan himself. I let them ring. Then, at 5 p.m., I texted Evan. Check court filings. I'm done playing nice. He never replied. By the next morning, the investors who stood by Evan were scrambling. Without cash injections, the company was insolvent. Servers went dark. Employees got layoff notices. I watched the dominoes fall from my apartment window. Each ping of my inbox was another piece of news: vendor lawsuits, angry clients, regulatory inquiries. Everything Evan built was crumbling. I wasn't celebrating. A company's collapse is still a disaster zone. But somewhere between relief and regret, I felt vindicated. This was justice, ruthless but exact. I'd weaponized proof and leverage, the same way Evan had used our family bond against me. On Wednesday, I filed an amended lawsuit naming Tess as a co-plaintiff, citing her documents and testimony. The judge granted an injunction freezing all company assets pending trial. That meant any funds left in the business account were off limits. Evan called. I let it go to voicemail. Thursday morning, I ran into a former employee, Sarah, at a cafe. She'd been with us since day one. She looked tired but hopeful. I heard what happened, she said, sliding into the booth. I'm sorry you had to go through that. I'm looking for a new gig, but if you ever need help rebuilding, I nodded. Her loyalty meant everything. Maybe rebuilding wasn't out of the question. That evening, Miles showed up at Rita's door, desperate. He begged me to negotiate, to drop the suit, to let them buy me out for a fraction of the paper value. He even called Evan unreasonable. Rita answered the door, looked him up and down, and refused to let him in. I watched through the peephole, hidden in the hallway. Miles turned and left, shoulders slumped. It was satisfying. The hardest moment came when I realized how much this had cost me. The company was my creation, my sweat, my sleepless nights, my grief and hope stitched together. Watching it burn, even in partial justice, felt like pulling a scar open for catharsis. But then I remembered the year I spent rebuilding my life after the crash. I knew how to start over. By Friday, I had a skeleton crew of 3 freelancers and Sarah ready to help. We set up a basic website called Rebuilt Creative. No fancy branding yet, just my name, our services, and a tagline. Built on trust. It felt small, but it felt honest. Saturday afternoon, I ran into Evan at a mutual friend's party, awkward and inevitable. He gave me that same smirk he used when he locked me out. His expensive watch gleamed in the party lights. I walked over. He opened his mouth. I shook my head. No words needed. He knew I'd won what mattered. The moral high ground, a fresh start, and a reputation for fighting back. I left the party with Sarah, drank cheap beer on Rita's porch, and laughed about absurd things: new office space, potential clients who hated corporate bullshit, living without masks or games. I felt lighter than I had in years. Evan's empire was dust, but my new one was just beginning. The betrayal still stung, but it had cracked something open, a door I never thought to knock on. Family was burned, but freedom felt real. And for the first time since I was 17, I wasn't carrying anyone else's weight. I was carrying my own, and that was enough.